Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So this week I'm going to talk to you guys about shaft lean at impact. And recently I've had a lot of people asking me about how pros are able to so easily get the shaft to lean forward so that they can get more ball compression and better control of their low point. So when people learn about shaft lean for the first time, it's quite difficult to explain sometimes because they would have to rethink basically which part of the club they would have to move. So most people or most amateurs that struggle with shaft lean or low point control, they tend to want to focus on moving the club head end or the weight of the club head quite early in the downswing. But the truth is that you have to rely more on moving the handle end of the club just so that the handle can get a bit more forward and to prevent the club head from overtaking the grip too early in the downswing. And just so you guys know, when you try to lean the shaft forward, it should never feel physically strenuous. I know a lot of people that have purposely tried to lean the shaft forward feel a lot of strain in their trail wrist. But if you were to know or understand which end of the club to move and when to do it, it shouldn't feel strenuous at all. It should actually feel very relaxed. So to try and explain this concept as simply as I can to you guys, I'm going to break this into two parts. So in part one in this week's video, I'm going to kind of explain this concept using small swings, kind of the size of a chip shot. And I like to break it down into small parts just because people can focus on the feelings more and there's just less moving parts overall. So in part two, I will go over how to apply this concept in a more fuller backswing. So I'm at Golf Wave, which is an indoor facility in Singapore. They were nice enough to allow me to film in here. So I will leave the address to this location in the description box in case any of you guys visit and want a place to enjoy some indoor golf. Okay, so to start the explanation off, I usually kind of hold the shaft in front of me just to explain what the club actually does throughout the swing. So I want you guys to focus on kind of the butt end of the club and the club head end. And when a player struggles with shaft lean or low point control, basically when they swing the club head end kind of moves in this fashion to where the club head overtakes the butt end quite early. And the butt end actually doesn't really move much. Okay, so in the actual golf swing, when that happens, a player that actually gets the shaft to lean even backwards or more straight up and down, the butt end doesn't really move much. Okay, so if I kind of do this part here, you can see how the club head overtakes the grip quite a lot, but the butt end itself basically just stays in place. All right, so when a player does that, they can't really get the handle forward enough to lean the shaft forward as well. On the other hand, when a player does lean the shaft more forward, if you reference the butt end of the club head again, when the club goes back, they actually are able to move the butt end more forward before the club head itself overtakes the grip. Okay, so you can see when the club goes back, when the handle goes forward, you can see that the club head reaches the bottom of its arc further forward and more in front of the golf ball, as opposed to when the club head overtakes the grip with the butt end not moving. Okay, so stay with me here. But so again, when the player leans the shaft forward, they're able to move the grip more towards the target before the club head overtakes the grip. All right, so in an actual swing, when a player does that, you can see how I'm actually driving that butt end more towards the target. So in the follow through, you can see that that butt end has moved much further away from my body. Okay, whereas when a player doesn't lean the shaft forward, you can see that on the way through, the handle always stays much closer. Okay, so focusing on the distance away, the butt end, or how far the butt end is away from your body, will also help players drive the grip more forward so that the club head does not overtake too early. Now, the question is how do you do that? If you are a player that does kind of lean the shaft backwards or too straight up and down, how are you able to train this into your golf swing? So the simple awareness drill that I get everyone to kind of start off with is just grabbing your club and gripping it kind of near the bottom of the grip, just with your trail hand. So when you're holding it, I always get people to focus on the distance between the grip and your forearm. Okay, so you can see at the start, there's not too much of a gap there. And what you want to focus on is when you take it back, you should maintain the space at first. And when you're starting your downswing, you can kind of see how I actually push the grip downwards, which creates a wider gap between the grip and my forearm. So when I go back, it should look something like this. You can kind of see how I'm creating a bigger space. I'm also driving the butt end forward as the club head kind of stays behind my hands. All right. So now a player that doesn't lean the shaft forward, they would kind of get the club head to look like this. So that grip would actually go into the forearm and the club head would overtake quite early. So what makes it strenuous for a lot of people is when they make their backswing, they'll create this angle here, but then they'll just hold the angle and basically try to drag the entire weight of the club head through. So you don't really want to do that, just because, again, you're not trying to drag the entire club head through. You want to actually focus on moving this end. So if I put the club down, it's actually quite easy to move this end of the club, right? So when I take it back, if I just focus on dragging this end forward and allow the club head to drag behind the grip, then it should take away all the strain in your trail wrist, okay? So you can do this with really small swings like this, but you can kind of see as I come down, I'm also adding extension into my trail wrist. So I'm adding a bit of load into that trail wrist. I feel like I'm pushing the grip down and forward. I do it really slow, right? So when you're able to do that, now when the club wants to come down, you can actually drop the club onto the ground further in front of the golf ball, right? Whereas if this butt end didn't move, you can't really get that club to bottom out in the right spot, right? So in previous videos, I also talked about like proper weight shift into the lead side. So when doing this drill, you want to combine what you're trying to feel in your trail hand with weight shift to the lead side. That'll also make it even easier to move this butt end forward. Okay, so I'm not doing this drill like this, just kind of pulling my arm through. I want you to have that feel, but also shift your weight into the lead side. And you'll feel that if you're able to properly combine these two things, it's quite easy to get the club head to bottom out much further forward. Okay, so again, if you're doing this, you kind of see the bottom of the arc is much further behind, whereas I'm kind of driving the grip forward, pushing the grip down. Right, you can see I'm bottoming out much further forward there. So now with both hands, after you get a feel for that, you want to make sure that you can combine that same feeling. You kind of see very slowly as I come down and I get that grip to go forward, it'll almost feel as if when you push the grip down and forward, the club head is actually still moving back behind your hands. Okay? Kind of like this. Okay? As opposed to this. All right? So when you give this drill a try, only go up to about waist high. And you'll feel that you also have to focus on moving this butt end forward much sooner than you think. So if I were to do the incorrect way, this versus the correct way, if you were to put those two videos side by side, and I do it in slow motion, you can kind of see a difference between how fast I initiate the downswing and how soon I'm driving the butt end forward. And you'll also notice that as I'm driving that butt end forward and I'm adding that extension to my trail wrist, the butt end moves forward and down, but the club head is actually still moving back behind my hands. Okay, so I just have a close-up view here of my trail hand, just so you can really get a close look as to what's happening. So when I do it the correct way, when I take it back and when I come down, you can kind of see how I keep the space between the grip and my forearm the same as I take it back. But as I start my downswing, you can kind of see how I create that space by adding that extension into my trail wrist. right? I'm feeling like I'm pushing the grip down, and I'm driving this butt end forward more towards the target at the same time. Really slowly, right? So when people initiate the downswing, you can see how soon or how quickly that butt end starts to change directions and move more towards the target at the same time that I'm creating that bigger gap between the butt end and my forearm. So I feel very loose in my trail arm. I'm not trying to go back, create the angle, and then hold the whole thing going through, because that would actually make you feel that strain in that trail wrist. You'll feel like you're carrying the whole weight of the club head through, which is why you feel that strain. Now, when I do it incorrectly, when I take it back and I create that angle, a lot of people will kind of come in this way where they decrease that space. So remember, you're trying to go from not creating any space to a larger space instead of creating that space and then losing that space very quickly. You can see how the butt end moves backwards. It actually hasn't moved much more forward. The club head is already past the grip. Whereas when I do it correctly, you can see that the club head only overtakes the grip well after impact, as opposed to it being overtaken almost at impact or even before impact, right? You can see I'm using a lot more of my wrist. I'm also feeling a lot more strain in that right wrist, okay? So one more time, when I do it correctly, I go back, not creating any space. I drive the grip forward and down, and I'm adding that extension in here. And then I'm allowing the club head to just fall and just overtake the grip after impact. Okay, this is incorrectly once more. Okay, and then this is what most people typically do, which you shouldn't be feeling, is you create that angle and you just drag the whole thing through. That'll also cause that strain in the right wrist. So now just to explain what people most commonly do when they try to lean the shaft forward is when they take it back and create the angles, they kind of try to maintain everything at this point and just try to drag the whole entire club head and weight of the club head through. But you'll notice that if you do this, when you create angles here and you drag it through, you'll feel like you can't reach the golf ball, right? So if you compare the distance between my lead shoulder and the club head at address versus when I try to drag everything, you'll see that because I'm holding all these angles in my wrist, the distance between my lead shoulder and that club head is shorter. So I technically won't be able to reach the ground if I hold on to these angles for too long. So the way that people compensate for that is when they create these angles and they drag, they have to actually lower or feel like they're lowering their right shoulder or their upper bodies closer to the golf ball. And you don't want to typically do that. So when you do this, you can see that in order for me to strike the golf ball, because I'm holding these angles, I have to drop my right shoulder lower so that I can get the club head to touch the ground, right? So instead of doing it that way, you want to feel as though you push the grip forward and down so that you can allow the club head to just drop ahead of the golf ball. So you can see, instead of dragging it and trying to reach down towards the golf ball, I can still let the club head drop forward ahead of the golf ball, so I'm touching the ground afterwards without having to actually get my upper body to get lower to the ground. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about anything that I've talked about, I know it can be a little bit confusing or complex, so I'm happy to answer any comments down below in the comment section if you are confused about anything. And be sure to follow me on my Instagram at Jonathan K. Moss. And if you're interested in doing some online lessons with me, you can go find the details through my profile on Skillist. I will leave the link to that also in the description box below. But I'll see you guys on the next video.